The winter in Silver Pine was not gentle. The snow came like a promise that never asked permission, and the wind carried secrets it had no intention of keeping. On one frozen evening, a police officer named Nathan Cole found something that should not have survived the cold. A small German Shepherd puppy left inside a shopping cart holding a torn toy and waiting for someone who never came back. What happened next changed not only the life of that dog, but the heart of an entire town. This is not just a rescue story. It is a story about waiting, about choosing, about the quiet miracles that appear when one person decides not to walk away. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from today and leave your city or country in the comments below. In Silver Pine, Montana, winter didn't arrive politely. It came like a law. By late afternoon, the sky had already turned the color of old steel, and snow drifted sideways through the narrow streets as if the wind had a grudge against anything that tried to stand upright. The town sat tucked between dark pine ridges and a river that froze in layered sheets, the kind of place where porch lights looked warm from far away but couldn't promise anything once you got close. The grocery store lot on the east side of town's Silver Pine Market was a wide, open plate of asphalt surrounded by sagging snowbanks, shopping carts gathered like metal skeletons near the entrance, and the constant faint howl of air moving through the mountains. Officer Nathan Cole stepped out into that lot like a man who'd been walking through winter his whole life, even when it was summer. Nathan was 36, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from years of hauling people out of ditches and pushing broken cars off icy roads. His face was rugged without trying to be handsome stubble that never quite turned into a beard, a small scar slicing through one eyebrow like a careless pencil line, and eyes a pale gray blue that looked calm until you paid attention and realized the calm was something he had taught himself to wear. The townspeople said Nathan was dependable. Some said he was distant. Both were true. He smiled when he had to, spoke with quiet patience when someone was afraid, and carried his own sorrow like a badge he never took off. 3 winters ago, a highway wreck on a mountain pass had taken his wife and little boy. Since then, Nathan kept his apartment tidy, his voice steady, his heart locked up tight, and he worked longer shifts than anyone asked for, as if staying busy might keep the cold from reaching the places it wanted most. That evening, he had just finished a welfare check on an elderly couple who refused to leave their cabin even as the storm warnings stacked up. He'd driven them firewood, checked their generator, and told them a joke that wasn't funny, just to see if they'd laugh anyway. Now his patrol SUV idled with a tired rumble near the far end of the lot while he walked toward his car, shoulders hunched against the wind, gloved hands tucked into the pockets of his heavy winter uniform. The snow caught on his eyelashes. His radio crackled once, then went quiet. He was already halfway to the driver's side door when he saw the shopping cart. It wasn't where carts were supposed to be. It sat crooked under the store's overhang near a side exit close enough to shelter that the wind didn't slam it, but far enough away that it looked like someone had left it there in a rush and never looked back. One wheel was jammed at an odd angle, the metal frame dusted with a thin crust of snow. Nothing about it should have mattered. In a town like Silver Pine, winter always left strange objects in strange places. A mitten on a fence post, a sled in a ditch, a single boot outside the library. But Nathan's eyes paused on that cart and refused to move on. There was something inside it that didn't belong. At first he thought it was a bundled coat. Then it shifted. A small movement, like a breath you almost missed. Nathan's instincts, sharpened by years of traffic stops and domestic calls and nights spent searching frozen ravines, tightened in his chest. He took a careful step closer, boots crunching softly. Another step. Under the dim glow of the overhang light, he saw a puppy curled in the far corner of the cart, pressed into himself as if trying to become smaller than the world. A German Shepherd, male, about 4 months old, too young to have learned what hopelessness was supposed to feel like, yet already wearing it like an old sweater. His coat was black and tan but dulled by dust and snow, fur clumped in places like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. His ears were comically large for his head, one ear standing up more than the other, both fringed with frost. His legs were folded tight beneath him, and his ribs hinted faintly under the fur in a way that made Nathan's stomach twist. The puppy's eyes were the deepest brown, wide and steady, not frantic, just fixed on Nathan with an expression that felt older than puppyhood. And then Nathan saw what the pup was holding. Clenched gently between his jaws was a stuffed toy, an old plush reindeer, gray-brown and worn thin, one ear torn, the red nose faded nearly white. The puppy didn't chew it, didn't shake it, didn't play. He held it the way a drowning man holds driftwood. The toy was not a toy to him. It was a promise. It was proof. It was the last thing someone had given him before leaving him behind. Nathan stopped a few feet away. "Hey there," he said softly, the words thin in the wind. He kept his voice low the way he did with frightened kids on the side of the road. The puppy didn't bark, didn't whine. He only tightened his grip on the reindeer and blinked once, slow, as if he was still deciding whether Nathan was real or just another figure passing by. Nathan glanced around the lot. A couple pushed a cart toward their truck, laughing about something. A teenager jogged to his car, hood up, face buried in his phone. Snow hissed against the asphalt. No one looked toward the cart. No one slowed down. It was almost as if the puppy had been assigned the role of invisible. Nathan's jaw clenched. He'd seen that kind of blindness before. People stepping around what hurt because noticing it felt like responsibility. He walked closer, then crouched, keeping his hands visible. His gloves were black, thick, and clean. The puppy's gaze dropped to them, then back to Nathan's face. Nathan did not reach into the cart. He knew better. He'd learned the hard way that rushing trust was the fastest way to shatter it. He just stayed there, steady as a fence post, letting the puppy read him. Minutes passed. The wind seemed to swirl around the overhang like it was trying to listen. Nathan's knees started to ache against the cold, and still he didn't move. The puppy's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but he didn't shift away. He didn't come forward either. He was waiting. Not for Nathan, for someone else, for footsteps and a voice that would say, "There you are," for a familiar hand that would lift him from the cart and carry him home. Nathan's throat tightened, and he hated how much he recognized that kind of waiting. Because he'd done it too, once after the wreck in the hospital hallway, staring at a closed door, still believing some miracle would rewrite the story. The puppy's hope wasn't bright. It was the kind that hurts, the kind that survives on scraps long after it should have starved. A woman walked past with two small kids, bundled like little astronauts. The younger child, a girl with rosy cheeks and a pink hat, pointed toward the cart. "Mommy, look, a puppy!" The mother barely glanced. She pulled her daughter closer, her expression tightening like the cold had crawled into her face. "Don't touch it," she said, not cruelly, just quickly, like someone avoiding trouble. They hurried on. The puppy didn't react. He curled a fraction tighter around the reindeer, as if he'd heard that sentence before in a different form. Nathan exhaled slowly, the breath fogging. He looked for a note tucked into the cart's metal frame. He checked the puppy's neck for a collar. Nothing. No tag. No leash. No microchip scanner in Nathan's car. Not on patrol, not like animal control. Just a puppy, a torn reindeer, and the quiet indifference of a parking lot. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a protein bar he'd forgotten from earlier, the kind he ate between calls. He unwrapped it slowly so the sound wouldn't startle. The puppy's nostrils flared. He didn't move. Nathan broke off a small piece and set it on the ground, a few feet away from the cart. Then he scooted backward an inch, turned his head slightly to the side, and waited. It felt ridiculous, sitting on a freezing pavement with snow sweeping in, but Nathan had learned that patience was sometimes the only tool that worked. The puppy's eyes flicked to the food, then back to Nathan. A long pause, then, so quietly it could have been imagined, the puppy shifted. One paw slid forward. His body stayed low. He stretched his neck, sniffed, froze again. Nathan didn't move. Finally, the puppy eased down and reached with his mouth, taking the piece of food without stepping fully out of the cart. The reindeer never left his jaws for more than a heartbeat. He ate as if apologizing for needing it. Nathan's chest ached with something he didn't have a name for. He sat there longer, watching snow gather on the cart's edges and on his own shoulders. Cars came and went. The sky darkened. The lot lights flickered on one by one, casting yellow pools on the snow like lanterns in a lost kingdom. Still, no one came for the puppy. The wind grew sharper. The puppy's eyelids drooped, then opened again, fighting sleep, fighting surrender. Nathan rubbed his gloved hands together, then spoke softly, not to frighten the pup, but to anchor himself. "I don't think they're coming back," he murmured. The puppy's ears twitched. His grip on the reindeer loosened for a breath. Just a breath, then tightened again, as if he'd heard the truth and refused to accept it. Nathan stood slowly, careful not to loom. He stepped back toward his patrol SUV, opened the rear door, and pulled out an old fleece rescue blanket he kept for accidents and stranded drivers. The blanket was navy blue, faded at the corners, smelling faintly of detergent and the inside of a warm car. He walked back to the cart and, with the gentleness of someone laying an offering at an altar, folded it and placed it inside the cart like a bed. Then he retreated a few steps and waited again, palms open at his sides. The puppy stared at the blanket, stared at Nathan, stared at the darkening lot beyond the overhang, as if expecting a familiar silhouette to appear at the edge of the snow. Nothing. Only wind. Only white. And Nathan, who sat down again on the pavement, as if the world had written him into this moment on purpose. The puppy shifted 1 inch closer to the blanket. Not trust. Not yet. But consideration. And in Silverpine, in a winter that had swallowed too many goodbyes, that inch felt like a small rebellion against the storm. Nathan stayed still, eyes soft, breathing slow, letting the puppy decide. The chapter ended with both of them waiting under the overhang, one man who had sworn he would never attach his heart to anything fragile again, and one puppy who had been left in a shopping cart with nothing but a torn reindeer and a hope that refused to die. Night arrived in Silverpine the way it always did in winter, not with darkness, but with weight. Snow pressed the world flat. The parking lot of Silverpine Market had emptied except for a few distant headlights and the low hum of wind moving through the pines. Officer Nathan Cole still sat on the cold pavement beneath the store's overhang, knees aching, breath slow, shoulders dusted white. The puppy had not moved far. One paw now rested on the folded navy fleece, the other still clutched the edge of the metal cart, as if he were afraid that choosing warmth meant losing the only place he knew. The torn reindeer toy remained locked between his jaws. His eyes never left the entrance of the lot. He was not watching Nathan. He was watching for ghosts. Nathan finally rose, joints stiff, and keyed his radio. His voice was steady but quiet. "Dispatch, this is Cole. I've got an abandoned juvenile canine at Silverpine Market, under the east overhang. Looks like a German shepherd, about 4 months, no collar, no owner in sight." He paused, watching the puppy's ears twitch at the sound. "Request animal control and local vet assistance. I'll remain on scene." The radio crackled confirmation. The wind answered with a howl. Nathan sat again, not wanting the puppy to think he was leaving. He spoke without raising his voice, telling the puppy things that did not matter and mattered more than anything. About the river freezing, about the old bridge on Cedar Street that moaned in storms, about how some winters felt like they would never end but always did. The puppy listened without looking at him, eyes still on the lot, hope like a thin flame behind them. 20 minutes later, a truck rolled in, slow and careful, chains whispering over ice. Marla Henley stepped out first, Silverpine's animal control officer. She was in her late 40s, compact and strong, cheeks weathered by years of wind, hair tucked into a knit cap, eyes sharp but kind. Everyone in town said Marla could read a scared animal the way some people read weather. Behind her came a small SUV bearing the emblem of Northridge Veterinary, and from it emerged Dr. Evan Rhodes, the town's primary vet, early 30s, tall and narrow, with dark hair that refused to stay combed and hands that always seemed to move gently, even when he stood still. Evan had chosen Silverpine over larger cities because, as he once told Nathan, "Here, when you save something, it actually matters." Marla knelt several feet from the cart. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said, voice low as falling snow. The puppy stiffened, then relaxed a fraction when she didn't reach for him. Evan crouched beside Nathan. "How long has he been here?" Nathan shrugged. "Long enough to still believe someone's coming back." Evan followed the puppy's gaze into the empty lot and said nothing. They worked slowly, the way professionals do when fear is the loudest thing in the room. Marla slid a leash across the pavement and looped it around her wrist without advancing. Evan placed a soft towel on the edge of the cart and waited. Nathan stayed where he was, close enough for the puppy to see him, far enough not to crowd. Minutes stretched. Finally, the puppy shifted both paws onto the blanket. He sniffed the fleece, the towel, Marla's boot. He did not release the reindeer. Evan extended 2 fingers, not toward the puppy's head, but toward the toy, letting the puppy smell the cotton and the faint scent of antiseptic on his skin. The puppy blinked, once, twice, then allowed Marla to ease the leash around his neck. He did not fight. He did not surrender. He simply went very still, as if the world had stopped making sense and he was waiting for it to start again. They lifted him together. The puppy's body trembled, not from cold, but from the kind of exhaustion that comes after holding yourself together for too long. Nathan expected a squirm, a cry. Instead, the puppy tucked his head under Nathan's chin, the reindeer pressed between them like a secret. For a heartbeat, Nathan closed his eyes. He had not held anything that trusted him like this in 3 years. At the clinic, the lights were warm and too bright, the smell of disinfectant sharp against winter's breath. Evan weighed the puppy, took his temperature, listened to his heart. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, underweight but not critical, he said, jotting notes. He's a fighter. Marla checked for a microchip. The scanner beeped, then went silent. No record, no name, no home. The puppy lay on the table, reindeer under one paw, watching Nathan the way a child watches a parent in a crowded room. Evan cleaned a small raw spot behind one ear, the skin cracked from cold. The puppy flinched but did not pull away. "You're doing good," Evan murmured, the same words Nathan used on accident victims. They sounded different in a vet's mouth, but they worked just as well. By protocol, a report was filed. Location, time, condition, estimated age. Marla photographed the puppy, the reindeer, the cart under the overhang, the empty lot. Notices would go up. A brief post would appear on the town's message board and the shelter's page. Found German Shepherd puppy, male, juvenile, Silver Pine Market. If this is your dog, contact Animal Control. The waiting period would be 7 days. 7 days for a voice from the past to claim him. 7 days for hope to keep bleeding. Nathan watched the puppy drink warm water from a shallow bowl, careful and slow. "He needs a name for the paperwork," Marla said. Nathan hesitated. Names made things real. Names meant you could lose them. He looked at the puppy's coat, the black and tan dulled by dust, the faint ash gray where snow and dirt had mixed. He thought of the wreck, of what was left when the fire trucks were done. "Ash," he said. The puppy lifted his head, as if the word had weight. Evan wrote it down. Ash. Because the storm had worsened, Marla asked if Nathan could foster Ash during the hold. The shelter was full and the roads were already treacherous. Nathan knew the law. He also knew his apartment was warm, his couch worn, his heart mostly empty. "I'll take him," he said, before the part of himself that said no could speak. They wrapped Ash in the navy fleece. Marla handed Nathan a bag with kibble, a small bowl, antibiotics, instructions. Evan squeezed Nathan's shoulder. "Call me if he coughs, if he won't eat, if he just looks at you funny," he said. "That dog has been waiting. Don't let him wait alone." The drive home was quiet. Snow brushed the windshield in pale feathers. Ash lay on the back seat, reindeer tucked under his chin, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass. Nathan checked the mirror at every red light, half expecting the puppy to vanish like a story you don't tell anyone because you're afraid it won't be true. At the apartment, Nathan spread the fleece near the couch and placed the bowl beside it. Ash sniffed the room, every corner, every shadow. He did not bark. He did not explore. He returned to the fleece and lay down, reindeer between his paws, eyes on the door. Night stretched. Nathan sat on the couch, boots off, radio silent. He watched Ash breathe. Every so often Ash would lift his head and stare at the door as if listening for a memory. Around 3 a.m, a soft thump woke Nathan. Ash stood beside the couch, reindeer in his mouth. He placed it carefully on the floor near Nathan's hand, then curled against the couch, his back pressed to the wood like he needed the weight of something solid to believe in sleep. Nathan whispered, "I'm here." Ash closed his eyes and let out a sound so small it was almost nothing. Morning came pale and gold. Nathan moved quietly, poured kibble, warmed a little chicken. Ash ate like the food might disappear if he hurried. Later, Nathan called Marla, then the clinic, then the town office, logging the case, the clock on the 7 days starting its slow march. He did not know what would happen when the waiting ended. He only knew that for now, In a winter that kept asking for more than people could give, a man and a puppy were not alone. Winter tightened its grip on Silver Pine as if it had something to prove. Snow kept falling in quiet layers, the town wrapped in white and shadow. The river frozen so solid it looked like glass laid across the earth. Officer Nathan Cole's apartment sat on the second floor of a brick building near Main Street, above a closed bakery whose windows were always fogged, even in summer. Inside, the heat clicked and sighed, the couch bore the faint smell of pine cleaner and old coffee, and the world felt smaller than it had the night before, as if the storm outside had pressed everything inward. Ash had not moved from the fleece when the sun rose. He lay on his side, ribs lifting slowly, the torn reindeer pinned under one paw like a promise he could not break. His ears twitched at the sound of passing trucks, at the scrape of snowplows in the distance. Nathan watched him from the kitchen doorway, coffee in one hand, a knot in his chest that did not loosen. When Ash opened his eyes, they met Nathan's and stayed there, steady and searching, the way a child looks at a stranger who has suddenly become important. Nathan did not rush him. He set the bowl of water down first, then the food. Ash rose cautiously, one paw at a time, the floorboards whispering beneath him. He approached the bowl, sniffed, drank, paused, then ate in small, careful bites, as if every mouthful were borrowed. The reindeer never left the floor within reach of his nose. When he finished, he did not wander the apartment. He returned to the fleece and lay down again, facing the door. Days fell into a quiet rhythm. Nathan went to work, leaving the radio low, the curtains open, the apartment warm. He arranged his schedule so he could check on Ash between calls. The town learned there was a dog with the officer now. Some smiled. Some shook their heads the way people do when they know winter has finally softened someone. Nathan pretended not to notice. Ash did not behave like a puppy. He did not chase light or gnaw on shoes or wag himself into exhaustion. He followed Nathan from room to room, never more than a few steps behind, like a shadow that had learned a heartbeat. If Nathan stopped, Ash stopped. If Nathan sat, Ash lay down beside him, head on paws, eyes open. Sometimes, when a door slammed outside, Ash would flinch and let out a soft sound in his sleep that was half breath, half memory. Nathan would wait for him to wake, then speak quietly until Ash's ears softened and his body loosened again. On the fourth day, a knock came. Grace Miller stood in the hallway, a folder tucked under her arm. Grace was in her early 40s, tall and narrow, with ash blonde hair pulled back in a low twist and eyes that had learned to stay gentle in rooms that were not. She worked for the county, coordinating therapy visits with schools and shelters, the kind of job that made people lean on you without knowing your weight. Grace had grown up in Silver Pine, had lost a brother to the river when they were teenagers, and had decided then that if the world insisted on taking things, she would give as much back as she could carry. Ash stiffened at the sound of the knock. His body went taut, head low, ears angled forward. Nathan opened the door slowly. Grace smiled at Ash and did not step inside. "Hi," she said to both of them. "I won't come in unless he says it's okay." Nathan crouched and rested a hand on the floor, not on Ash. Ash's gaze flicked between them. After a long moment, he rose and moved toward Grace, one cautious step, then another. He stopped at the threshold and lowered his head, the reindeer's place now empty between his paws. He extended his nose and touched Grace's palm, just barely. Grace's breath caught. She did not move. "He's special," she said softly. "Not broken. Listening." Grace left the folder and went. The apartment felt different after she closed the door, like something important had been named. That evening, as the storm climbed the windows, Nathan sat on the floor and spoke to Ash the way you speak when you are finally tired of carrying things alone. He told him about the wreck, about the mountain pass, about how he had waited in a hallway that smelled like bleach and winter until the world changed its mind about him. Ash crept closer, inch by inch, until his shoulder pressed against Nathan's knee. Nathan froze, then laid his hand on Ash's back. The fur was coarse and warm and real. He whispered, "You're safe now." Ash stayed. The next weeks brought small changes. Ash began to explore the apartment, sniffing corners, following the sound of the kettle, watching snow gather on the ledge. He still did not play. He did not bark. He listened. He waited. Sometimes Nathan would catch him staring at the door as if the past might try again. The seventh day came and went. No one called. No one claimed him. Marla phoned with the words that made it official. Nathan drove to the office and signed the papers, his name filling the space where a stranger's might have been. On the way home, he stopped at the vet. Evan smiled when he saw Ash and ran a careful hand along his spine. "He's gaining," he said. "Slow is good." Nathan nodded. Slow had kept him alive. Winter deepened. Grace visited again, and this time Ash met her without fear. She watched him move through the room and then looked at Nathan. "Have you thought about therapy training?" she asked. Nathan had not. He had thought about the mornings, about the way Ash's eyes softened when the sun rose, about the nights that were quieter now. "He doesn't act like a rescue," Grace said. "He acts like he's been waiting for something." They began slowly. Leash training in the snow, basic commands in the living room. Ash learned with an attention that felt like respect. He stumbled once, shied away from a passing siren, but he returned and sat, eyes on Nathan, ready to try again. The trainer came once a week, a patient woman named Lori Jensen, late 50s, gray hair in a braid, voice steady as a lighthouse. "That dog knows what pain is," she said after the second session, "and he knows how to stand next to it." By the end of the month, Ash's steps were surer. His ribs were less visible. He still slept near the door sometimes, but more often he slept at the foot of Nathan's bed, the reindeer now tucked beside him like a chapter he was not ready to close. One night, the wind cut the power. Nathan lit candles. Ash watched the flames with wide eyes, then lay down again, close enough to feel Nathan's breath. Outside, Silverpine lay buried in snow, the river sealed, the world holding still. Inside, a man and a dog learned a new kind of waiting, one that did not hurt as much. By the time spring tried to speak in Silverpine, winter had not yet loosened its grip. The mountains still wore their white crowns, the river lay sealed beneath glassy ice, and the streets held that quiet, aching hush that comes when a town has survived something together. Officer Nathan Cole had begun measuring time differently, not in shifts and case numbers, but in Ash's breathing, in the way the dog's steps had grown steadier on the frozen sidewalk, in the small victories that announced themselves without noise. Training days became anchors in the week. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Nathan would leave early, Ash riding in the back seat with his torn reindeer tucked against his chest, eyes watching the world with a calm that had taken months to earn. The training center sat on the edge of town in an old warehouse that smelled of sawdust and coffee. Lori Jensen, the trainer, late 50s, silver hair braided down her back, voice patient and unshakable, waited for them with her clipboard and that half smile that said she believed in work the way other people believed in miracles. Ash learned the basics with quiet determination. Sit, stay, heel, leave it. He did not rush. He did not resist. He listened. When another dog barked or lunged, Ash flinched once, then returned his gaze to Nathan's boots. His mistakes were gentle ones, a step too far, a glance at the door, a moment of hesitation when the room filled with noise. Each time Nathan knelt and whispered, "It's okay," and Ash steadied as if the words had weight. Weeks stretched into months. The snow outside thinned and thickened again, the town caught between seasons. Ash's ribs vanished beneath new strength. The raw spot behind his ear healed into a faint scar. His eyes, once so fixed on absence, began to look for presence. He still carried the reindeer, though sometimes he left it on the back seat during training, returning for it after, as if he were practicing a future where he would not need it as much. The first evaluation came on a bright morning when the air smelled of pine sap and thaw. 2 assessors from the county arrived, clipboards in hand, faces serious. Ash moved through the tests with the gravity of someone who understood what was being asked. He approached a woman who pretended to cry, sat beside her without touching, then leaned in just enough to let her know he was there. He ignored a dropped tray of metal objects. He navigated a room of children's laughter and sudden shouts without losing himself. When a man in a wheelchair extended his hand, Ash placed his chin there, steady as a stone. Afterward, one assessor looked at Nathan and said, "He's ready." The words settled into Nathan's chest like snow on a wound, cool and clean. Their first visit was at Silverpine Regional Hospital. The halls smelled of antiseptic and hope. Nurse Ellen Price, mid-50s, curly brown hair escaping her cap, guided them to the pediatric wing. Ellen had worked there since before Nathan was born. She believed in routine and mercy, in that order. The children's room was bright with drawings taped to the walls. Some kids smiled when they saw Ash, some did not. Ash did not choose the smiles. He walked straight to a boy named Lucas, 8 years old, skin pale as paper, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Lucas had lost his mother the month before. Ash sat at his side and did nothing else. Lucas's hand found Ash's fur and stayed. They returned every week. Schools, a grief group at the community center, a shelter that smelled of soup and winter coats. Everywhere Ash moved the same way, slow, respectful, certain. He never barked. He never demanded. He found the place where the room hurt most and lay down beside it. One afternoon, they went to a downtown grief circle for children. The room was heavy with the kind of silence that weighs more than sound. In the back sat a girl named Maya, 7, clutching a stuffed fox, hair falling over her face like a curtain. Ash walked past every other child and stopped at her feet. He did not touch her. He waited. After a long moment, Maya reached out and touched his head. She smiled, just a little. The circle breathed again. The weeks stitched together. Nathan began to see the world change in Ash's wake. Teachers called, counselors asked, parents wrote notes. They did not want a therapy dog, they said. They wanted him. Still, Ash remained himself at home. He slept by the couch. He followed Nathan from room to room. He sometimes looked at the door, the old waiting ghosting his eyes. Nathan never rushed him. He knew that some parts of winter melted only when they were ready. The call about the foster youth shelter came in late March. The director's voice was careful, tired. We have a group of teens who could use something, she said. They've been through more than I can say. Nathan agreed. The shelter sat on the edge of town, a brick building that once housed a factory. Inside, the walls were scuffed, the air thick with history. The teens sat in a loose circle, arms crossed, eyes guarded. One boy in the back wore his hood up, shoulders tight, jaw set like stone. His name was Elliot. He was 15, tall for his age, all angles and storm. He had moved through 4 homes in 3 years. He trusted nothing that came with a smile. Ash entered the room and paused, his ears lifted. His eyes found Elliot as if drawn by gravity. He walked past the others and stopped in front of him. He sat. He waited. Minutes passed. The room did not breathe. Then Ash did something he had never done before. He turned, walked to Nathan, and took the torn reindeer from the bag Nathan carried. He returned to Elliot and placed it carefully at the boy's feet. The world cracked open. Elliot stared at the toy. His hands dropped from his chest. "You left this for me?" he whispered. Ash did not move. His tail thumped once against the floor. Elliot picked up the reindeer, his face collapsing into something raw and young. "I had one like this," he said. "Before." Ash leaned in. Elliot did not pull away. That night at home, Ash lay by the door and stared at the floor. The reindeer was not with him. Nathan found it later under Elliot's chair at the shelter, exactly where Ash had placed it. Nathan had not taken it back. He knew what it meant. Ash slept differently after that, deeper, quieter, as if a long-held weight had been set down. Outside, Silver Pine's snow began to retreat, inch by inch. The river cracked its glass. The town breathed. Nathan watched Ash run in the yard one morning, ears high, eyes bright, and realized that waiting had become living. Spring did not rush Silver Pine. It arrived like a promise whispered too early, then proven slowly. The snow receded from the sidewalks in narrow rivers, and the river itself began to speak again, cracking and singing beneath the ice. Officer Nathan Cole marked the change by the way Ash's paws returned to the color of earth, by the way the air softened around the mornings, by the fact that some nights the heater no longer clicked awake. Time had begun to behave differently since the night Ash had left his reindeer behind. It no longer pressed, it unfolded. Ash's days grew full with the work he had learned to do. They visited the hospital on Tuesdays, the elementary school on Thursdays, the community grief circle every other Saturday. The shelter director called more often now, asking if Ash might come again, if perhaps he could stay a little longer, if the teens were calmer when he was near. Nathan said yes when he could. He said no when the snow returned without warning. He was learning to protect the small life he had chosen. At home, Ash no longer slept by the door. He slept at the foot of Nathan's bed, his body turned toward him, the space where the reindeer once lay now empty and strangely peaceful. Nathan sometimes woke in the night and listened to Ash breathe, the sound anchoring him in a way he had not known since before the wreck. When Ash dreamed, his paws twitched, and Nathan would rest a hand on his shoulder until the movement stilled. One afternoon, Grace Miller called with a quiet urgency. "The foster youth shelter asked if you could come tonight," she said. "Elliot's been different, not bad, just quieter, like he's standing at the edge of something." They went. The shelter's common room was lit with late sunlight, dust floating like stars. Elliot sat at the table, the torn reindeer placed carefully in front of him. He looked up when Ash entered. His eyes softened, then filled. "You came," he said, as if he had not expected anything to ever come back to him again. Ash walked to him and sat, his shoulder touching the boy's knee. Elliot ran a hand over Ash's head, slow and deliberate. "I still have it," he said, lifting the reindeer. "I keep it here, so I remember." Grace watched from the doorway. Nathan stood back, understanding that this was not his moment. Afterward, as they left, Ash paused at the threshold and looked once more at the room, then at Elliot. The boy nodded, a silent thank you. Ash turned away without the toy, and for the first time, he did not look over his shoulder. That night, Ash lay down on the rug and slept, as if the world had finally made sense. The weeks carried on, threaded with visits and small miracles. A girl in the hospital spoke her first word in months. A teacher wrote Nathan a note that said only, "Thank you" for him. A counselor said Ash's presence had stopped a boy from walking out into the cold one night. Nathan did not answer any of them with anything grand. He nodded. He shook hands. He drove home with Ash in the back seat, watching the sky. Then came the call that changed the map of everything. The shelter director spoke first. "Elliot's caseworker found his aunt," she said, "in Idaho. She wants him. They're arranging the move." There was a pause. He asked if he could see Ash again before he goes. They met at the shelter on a windy evening. Elliot stood in the yard, backpack at his feet. The reindeer was in his hands. When Ash approached, Elliot knelt and pressed his forehead to Ash's. "You did this," he whispered. "You showed me how to stay." Ash licked his cheek once, a gesture he rarely made. Elliot laughed through tears. When it was time to leave, Elliot did not give the reindeer back. He tucked it into his bag and slung it over his shoulder. Ash watched him go. His body did not tremble. His eyes did not beg. He stood very still, and when Elliot turned and waved, Ash lifted his tail and held it there, a quiet flag of hope. They drove home in silence. The wind brushed the windows. Nathan glanced in the mirror. Ash's gaze was steady, fixed on the road ahead. The next morning, Silver Pine woke to rain. The snow finally surrendered its last thin borders, and the earth breathed. Ash stepped into the yard and stood with his face lifted, eyes closed, the rain threading his fur. Nathan watched from the doorway and felt something old and heavy loosen inside him. They did not go to any visits that day. Nathan took the morning off. He made coffee and eggs. He sat on the steps with Ash beside him, the world quiet and new. In the afternoon, Grace stopped by with a stack of letters. Parents, teachers, the shelter, the hospital. She placed them on the table and smiled. "He's doing good work," she said. Nathan nodded. He knew. That evening, as the sky burned pink over the mountains, Ash brought Nathan a stick from the yard and dropped it at his feet. It was the first time he had ever invited play. Nathan stared at the stick, then at Ash, then laughed, a sound he had not heard from himself in years. He picked it up and threw it. Ash ran, ears high, legs strong, joy written across him like spring. They stayed outside until the light was gone. By the time the last wall of snow retreated from Silver Pine, the mountains no longer looked like they were holding their breath. The river ran dark and fast, carrying winter's stories downstream, and the town moved the way people do after surviving something together. Slower, softer, grateful for ordinary things. Officer Nathan Cole noticed the change in himself before he noticed it anywhere else. He slept through the night. He drank his coffee without staring at the wall. He laughed sometimes, and the sound no longer surprised him. Ash had changed too. He did not sleep by the door anymore. He did not circle the room before lying down. He chose the foot of Nathan's bed, his body turned toward him, steady and sure, as if the map of his world had finally been drawn and he trusted where it led. In the mornings, when Nathan laced his boots, Ash waited by the door with his leash already in his mouth, eyes bright, tail low but moving, patient in the way only a creature that has learned safety can be patient. The town learned their routine. They walked past the bakery where the owner, Mrs. Helen Crowley, a short, round woman with white curls and a laugh like bells, always came outside to offer Ash a biscuit. They crossed Cedar Street where the old bridge groaned less now that the ice was gone. They passed the river path where children rode bikes and called Ash's name. He did not chase. He stayed beside Nathan, a presence more than a body. The therapy visits continued, not as a project anymore, but as a part of life. At the hospital, Nurse Ellen would clear a chair and say, "Ash is here," as if announcing a holiday. In the school, the principal, Mark Doyle, a tall man with gentle hands and too many worries, would walk them to the counseling room and thank Nathan with his eyes. At the shelter, the director stopped using the word program and started using the word hope. One afternoon, a reporter from the county paper asked to write about Ash. Nathan almost said no. He had learned to keep the world small. But Grace stood beside him and said, "Let them see what's possible." So Nathan agreed. They met at the river in the late light. The reporter, Tom Whitaker, early 30s, thin, with a notebook and an earnest smile, listened while Nathan told the story of a shopping cart under an overhang, of waiting, of winter. He watched Ash move through the park and write it all down. The article ran the next week under a simple headline, "The Dog Who Stayed." People began to come from nearby towns, some with children, some with their own quiet hurts. Ash met them all the same way, slow, respectful, steady. On the anniversary of the wreck that had taken Nathan's family, he took the day off. He drove out to the pass where the road curved between the rocks and the sky. He stood there with Ash beside him, the wind cool and clean. He spoke their names out loud, something he had not done in years. Ash listened. When Nathan finished, Ash pressed his head into Nathan's leg and stayed there until the words were done. When they returned to Silver Pine, the sky was wide and blue, the kind that made you believe in beginnings. That evening, as the sun slid behind the pines, Nathan knelt in the yard and called, "Ash." His voice was clear, strong, a call meant to be answered. Ash was across the grass, chasing a drifting leaf. He froze at the sound of his name. He turned. He ran. Not because he was afraid to lose Nathan, not because he was still waiting for something else. He ran because he wanted to be there. He reached Nathan and skidded to a stop, tail high, breath quick, eyes shining. Nathan laughed and pulled him close, the world narrowing to the simple truth of it. The snow was gone. Winter had taught them both what it meant to hold on. Spring had taught them what it meant to stay. They went inside together, the door closing softly behind them, the night settling into its place. And for the first time, neither of them was waiting anymore. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder or light. Sometimes they arrive as a small, wounded soul in the cold, waiting for someone to stop. This story reminds us that God often works through ordinary people, through a police officer who chose compassion, through a dog who refused to stop believing, through a simple moment of staying when walking away would have been easier. In our own lives, we all face winters of the heart, loss, loneliness, fear, and doubt. But just like in this story, God sends signs of hope when we least expect them. A person who listens, a hand that reaches out, a chance to begin again. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story means to you. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more stories of healing and light. May God bless every one of you who is watching. May He guide your steps and warm your heart, even in the coldest seasons. If you believe in this message and in the quiet miracles of love, please comment Amen below.